salvete discipuli. Today we are doing chapter 18 in Wheelock's Latin, which deals with first, second conjugation verbs in the present passive system. Now, what do I mean by the present passive system? I mean the present passive indicative, the imperfect passive indicative, the future passive indicative, and the present passive infinitive. Okay, you will need to learn all of these forms for third IO, and fourth conjugations as well, but that's going to be a later chapter, so let's not worry about those now. We're going to just follow the present passive system for the first and second conjugation verbs. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the passive voice. This is the first chapter to introduce the passive voice to you this year. So let's talk a little bit about the differences between an active verb and a passive verb. An active verb has the subject of, the subject of the verb is doing the action of the verb. Okay, so active verbs, the subject does the action. In a passive verb, the subject of the verb has the action done to it. Okay, so how does that revealed, I suppose, in the actual verbs? I love is active because the action is loving and the subject, I am doing it, as opposed to I am loved, in which the subject, I, am not the one doing the action of am loving. That is someone else. Instead, I'm having that action done to me. Okay? So I love versus I am loved. In English, the passive is almost always used with the past helping form of the verb, and then one of the helping verbs. I am, you are, he, she, it is loved, so on and so forth. Were loved, has been loved, all of that stuff, depending on the tense of the verb. Okay? To form the passive for the first two conjugations, for the future imperfect and present passive indicative, you need your present stem, and then you just add the passive endings to it. To form the present passive infinitive, you take the second principal part, remove the final E, and replace it with a long I. So let's take a look at some of the charts that show us these personal endings. So present passive indicative is the first person singular is the first principal part plus an R, and then after that you need your present stem. Second and third singular are the present stem plus ris and ter. Plural is the present stem plus mer, many, inter. Okay, and again, the infinitive is the second principal part, remove the final E, and then add a long I. And we're going to go through two paradigms, so you'll be able to follow the example. Imperfect passive indicative, you need the present stem, and then you add the imperfect passive endings bar, baris, bator, bamor, bamini, bantor. Future passive indicative, you need the present stem, and then you add the future passive endings bor, baris, bitor, bimor, bimini, buntor. Okay? So you just have to memorize those endings. There you go. Okay, so let's look at our first paradigm verb, our first example verb, laudo, laudare, laudavi, laudatum. We need to get our present stem, lauda, because we're going to have to use that. Our first person singular present passive indicative is the first principal part plus R, so it's laudor. After that, we need the present stem, and then we add the ris, ter, mer, mini, and tor. So laudor, laudaris, laudator, laudamor, laudamini, laudantor. And again, if this were active, laudo, it would be I praise, but it's passive laudor, so I am praised. Active laudas, you praise. Passive laudaris, you are praised. Present active laudat, he praises, she praises, it praises. Laudator, passive, he is praised, she is praised, it is praised. Okay. Our present passive infinitive is the second principal part, laudare, with the E removed and replaced with an I. Translated to be praised. Our imperfect passive indicative, again, we need our present stem, lauda, and then we add the bar, baris, bator, bamor, bamini, bantor. So lauda bar, I was being praised. Lauda baris, you were being praised. Lauda bator, he, she, it was being praised. Lauda bamor, lauda bamini, lauda bantor. Notice that the imperfect passive still has that continuous past action. I was being praised, okay? Because with the imperfect, you have to show continuous or incomplete past action. Future, lauda bor, I will be praised. Lauda beris, lauda bitor, lauda bimor, lauda bimini, lauda buntor. And again, I will be praised, as opposed to the active lauda bo, I will praise. Okay? I also have a second conjugation verb here, video, videre, vidi, visum. And again, it follows the same pattern. You have your first principal part plus the R for the first person singular present active passive indicative, present passive indicative. And then you have your present stem plus the present passive ending. So videor, videris, videtur, videmor, videmini, videntur. And your present passive infinitive, videri, to be seen. Now, here's the important thing about video in the passive. Video in the active means to see. In the passive, it can mean to be seen, or as you can see as my note from my note at the bottom, it can also translate as to seem. So videor can mean I am seen, or it can mean I seem. Okay, videtur can mean he is seen or he seems. Okay. Imperfect and future passive, would a bar, would a baris, would a bator, would a bamor, would a bamini, would a bantor. Again, I was being seen, he, she, it was being seen, so on and so forth. Could also be I was seeming, or he, she, it was seeming, okay? And then the future passive, would a bor, would a baris, would a bitor, would a bimor, would a bimini, would a buntor, translates I will be seen, you will be seen, he, she, or it will be seen. But again, it can also translate I will seem, okay? You will seem. Okay, there's only one last thing for me to introduce you to, which is the ablative of personal agent. So you should add this to your ablative of what sheet, and then also understand how we use it. Now, the interesting thing about the ablative of personal agent is that it has to refer to a person. Okay, ablative of personal agent is a person. Here's the interesting thing about this particular ablative use. It's only used with passive verbs, or at least for the most part, it's only used for passive verbs. And it indicates the person who is doing the action of the passive verb, right? Because the subject is not doing the action of a passive verb. That would make the verb active. So you need to have somehow showing who is doing the action of the passive verb, and that's the ablative of personal agent, okay? You use the preposition a, and it translates by, okay? I know you're used to ab or a translating as from or away from, but when used as an ablative of personal agent, it translates by. Now let me give you an example of how this works. In the first sentence, agricola uxorum suam amat, we have an active verb, amat, third person singular, so subject is agricola, and then we have our direct object. The farmer loves his wife, right? Now, if we make this amat, this active verb passive, amater, then it's the wife who is being loved. So we take our direct object and make that the subject. The wife is loved by the farmer. The farmer is the one doing the love, so he's doing the action of the passive verb, and therefore has to be the ablative of personal agent. And so we have ab plus the ablative. All right, I look forward to your questions. Make sure you bring your notes in on Monday, and I will see you then. Have a good weekend.